I'm Robert.
I'm James.
I'm Dawson.
I'm Andrew.
And this is the Adrenaline Factory. All right, guys, so we're back. We're on this Acura TL that we've been working on. It's a 13-to-1 high compression build. We got this actually from another guy who wasn't able to finish it. So we've since done the wiring, we've redone all the fuel lines, we modified the fuel basket because it had been cut up and there was no clamp and stuff in there on the fuel pump. And then we remounted the E85 sensor, we wired it, we wired the fuel pressure sensor, we put on an oil pressure sensor and wired it. We capped off the ports on the back of the motor that had been opened for the oil cooler because they were too close to the axle and you couldn't get a really good line set up in there without having issues with clearance. So we modified the oil filter adapter housing for that. We made a remote oil filter. We also hard-lined to this from here to the cooler as well. And then from the cooler, it's soft-lined from there around to the oil filter adapter. We still have to, right now we've just got it held up, but we have a bracket that mounts the fans and stuff on there. So we're gonna go ahead and put it back on. We just wired these Audi R8 coil packs onto here. We still got to put the brackets on to hold them. We made this throttle bracket here, moved the throttle cable to underneath. We also drilled and tapped a port in the bottom of this to put a air idle control valve off of a GM on there. It's like a universal block that they make to be able to use the GM air idle control valve. Made mounts for the fuse box, made this mount for the clutch reservoir. We were just going to put a generic like 350Z one on there, but he had already bought this one, so we made a place for that. Just trying to button everything up now. We're having a little bit of issues with crank signal, which we've been having a lot lately on almost every standalone that we do on any of these JDM cars. For some reason, they don't like to pick up the stock crank sensor, so we rewired it and put it in a shielded wire setup because originally it wasn't in the harness that way, and we think we may be getting some interference from ignition coils or the injectors or something. So we went ahead and shielded it just in case, and also made sure that we're getting good continuity of the wire and not really high resistance or anything. So Jace is kind of finishing up some of the ones we were doing. We also are getting rid of some of these junction connectors to cleaning the harness up a little bit. We've got about half of this one done. We did all of the yellow and blacks, and now we have to do the black and whites, which are actually the coil powers. So we're gonna basically step these down since they're all powered from one tiny wire anyway. We'll kind of step them down into the harness and kind of tee them all in. Like you can see the yellow and black, we did this one right here. And then it jumps into that one, and they just kind of go as they go. They get down to one, and then it's split off to two for this side and that side. So we're kind of just tidying up that stuff. And then if Jacob wants to walk around on the inside of the car, he can show you the fuel tech, how we mounted it, and the Nano mount. It came out pretty good. We still are waiting on a couple interior panels because when we got the car, some of those had already been cut up. And we're gonna kind of get rid of a lot of the stuff that was done that way and redo it, make it look like a more factory install. So some of the panels are kind of crude, but the mounts themselves are all finished. Dawson is actually working on some broken suspension mounts that are on a Z06. So we'll shoot you on over to him and he can show you what's up with that one.
Hi, I'm Dawson. This is a customer Corvette we had come in, and it was wrecked, and it snapped off the ears where the coilovers are supposed to go. So we got a donor piece, which is this right here, that we're going to cut off this piece and weld to here, I had to sand off all the glue that holds the fender liners on, which this in case holds the fender, and this was damaged. So we pulled all this off. Now we're cleaning everything up and getting it prepped and ready so I can weld the new ears on for the coilovers in the front. And that's pretty much about it at the moment. Let me go see what Robert's up to.
All right, guys, so we're back at it, working on this Acura again. I think the last video we were still doing the wiring through the firewall. We did end up getting that fixed. We haven't wrapped any of the loom or anything on it, but all that's cleaned up now. Currently the issue that we're having is the alternator doesn't want to charge, which we kind of figured was going to be a problem because on the Hondas, the ECU has a lot to do with the control of this. This one fuel tech ECU that he's got does not control what we needed to control on the alternator. You can do generic outputs, but you can't do a pulse modulation less than 12 volts, which is the issue that we're having now. So we've read on some forums, kind of double checked the work with a couple of different pages, and what they're saying kind of makes sense, and it's to put a 1K resistor between the power wire and the field regulator. So we're just going to try to pin that in real quick and see if that does it. Jason and I tied the field regulator wire in with the TPS 5-volt reference wire, and it seemed to charge, but not very high. It was only charging it like right at 12.5, which is pretty much what battery voltage is. But we know it was charging because when we tried to start it, it was at 10 volts on the battery. So we do know it's putting out something, putting power to that field regulator wire. With a 1K resistor, we should be at like 6 volts, so maybe that'll change something different than what the 5-volt puts out. So kind of hope we're doing that. But Dawson was welding on the Corvette earlier, and we had him stop what he was doing and weld up the intake for this. We've still got a couple pieces to put together of it, but most of that's put together. We got a lot of the engine bay stuff cleaned up. Still have to mount the coils, but Jacob actually went and got us a valve cover from the junkyard so we could go ahead and fix it, because these are, I did not know it at the time, these are magnesium covers, and we were going to TIG weld fittings on them, so I went ahead and cut all the ports off and then realized that we can't weld them without the magnesium wire, and it just wasn't worth it. So we're just going to tap them and put pipe thread to AN unions in the valve covers instead of doing a welded fitting. So another good thing to remember is if you do try to weld magnesium, I don't think we would have a problem with the valve covers because they're a magnesium aluminum alloy. If it's like pure magnesium, it can catch on fire if you're not welding it properly. And I think a big thing of that has to do with shielding gas coverage. The biggest thing is magnesium, when it burns, it creates its own oxygen, and it can stay burning. And once it starts burning, you can't put it out. Because it does create its own oxygen, so it gives it its own source until it's gone, and it melts at a very high temperature. It's like 5,000 degrees or something. So definitely make sure you're experienced when you try to weld on stuff like that, or make sure that everything you're welding near you don't care about, because it'll all be gone. And sometimes on the welded fittings, it's a bad idea, because if you pull them off and you damage them at all, since they're external threads, you can't swap that fitting out if they're not part of the cover. So a lot of times it's good to weld a pipe thread fitting onto the valve cover and then do a union instead. So if it gets damaged, you can just easily replace it. So we just chose to opt out of the magnesium filler wire for those. And it was hard for us to find the fittings and stuff for a decent price local. So we're just gonna ditch those. But we're getting really close on this thing. All right, guys, well, be sure to check us out next week. We do a video every Friday. Be sure to follow us, subscribe, like, share, everything. Be back next week.